Conversation with my wife last night about her experiences working at a hospital. My wife works at a hospital that specializes in traumatic injury, long-term care, and end-of-life care. It's not just an old folks' home, but she has had several young people, and one was a gunshot victim, another motorcycle accident, and things like that. We watched a movie the other night that was a ghost movie, and last night we were talking about it because she recommended the movie to a coworker, and that led to a conversation about where she works. I asked her about how does she feel working at a place where people sometimes die. She said in her years working there, hundreds of people have died, maybe 1,000. Which is not to say a bad thing about the place, but it's the kind of place where people either end up dying there or get transferred to her care and die there. She doesn't work directly with patients, but in administrative, so she doesn't really go out into the rooms or venture out into the floors that much other than delivering paperwork to family members and sometimes getting signatures from caregivers. She told me about the time that when she had to work nights there when she first started due to staffing issues, she needed to cover for one of the other managers, and it was a brief number of times she had to do that, but she said if she had to work those hours, she would find another job. I asked her what did she experience, and she said that during the night the staff was significantly less throughout the building, like all the nurses and medical staff was there but out in the other part of the building, and that at night they turn off most of the lights near her office as most of those staff members were day shifts only, like billing, admissions, and etc. So her office was in the middle of all of those. She just would keep busy and have music or podcasts playing in the background while she worked. However, she hated going to the restroom or going to get a snack as she had to walk through a dead office space. She said that sometimes she would hear moaning like if someone was in pain, and the first time she thought she had a wanderer and went out to investigate and saw no one, so she called the nursing station for them to do a check. She thought for sure someone was out of their bed. Which it sometimes happens, a patient who, for whatever reason, will have a moment of strength and get up and out of bed and wander like a zombie. The first time it happened to her, it freaked her out. When my wife called the nursing station about a possible wanderer, they called her back like 15 minutes later reporting they did a bed check and everyone accounted for. She said she got chills and goosebumps. She also said that the deaths always come in threes. She said that the nurses also notice it too. And it's always one right after another. She also said that for some reason in the hospital garden, stray cats always come when the deaths occur. She did say that people in the hospital will sometimes feed the cats and family members visiting will feed them, but that when a death occurs, a bunch of cats show up in the garden. She said it's an odd thing. She told me about a time when she had to get some paperwork signed and that the family member was going to meet her in the grandma's hospital room, that she went to meet the family member and got there before the family member arrived, and that the patient was basically in like a coma. So she sat in the chair next to the bed looking over the paperwork, and that the lady started talking in another language, and as soon as the family arrived, she stopped, and my wife was like, okay. She asked the family, oh, what language does your grandma speak? They looked at her puzzled and said just English. Lastly, during COVID, it was really hard on all of them. They lost a lot of patients during that time, but not really COVID related. She said, I think when they stopped family members from visiting, a lot of them just gave up on life. During that time, she would come home crying almost every day. Interesting to know about the cats. I've heard stories of dogs, cats going to lay on the person who's about to pass, but hadn't heard of groups of stray cats gathering. Not to get dark, but I do hope a bunch of cats, and dogs or animals in general, come gather near wherever I end up ending, hopefully of old age. Sparkling heart. If you're going to get dark, you did it in the most wholesome possible way. It's a part of life. It only makes sense to have hopes for our own ends. Smiley face. My mom is a retired nurse. She recalls that when she worked at a busy city hospital, there would always be groups of cats crying when a person dies. She said the cats were crying when a family member came to deliver the news that her dad had died at another hospital. This was in the 70s. So odd. It really is. It raises so many questions too. I was a nurse on a floor with high acuity patients who often needed care over several weeks to many months. The oncology patients were at one end of this floor as well. Death was very common, sometimes unexpectedly and sometimes gruesomely. Most of the patients were uninsured, Medicaid, and would be with us for long stretches until they died because of the lack of open beds in other long-term care facilities. We also had many frequent flyers, patients that repeatedly came back to us. We had a very different vibe than the other shorter stay med-surg floors, and we didn't have the unconscious patients of an ICU. It was very active, and we got to know our patients better than many other nurses did. Some of the patients felt very comfortable on our floor, like it was a second home to them. We were often the only attentive caregivers for the ones without family or those living in marginal circumstances. All the above makes it unsurprising to me that many people felt creeped out on our floor. Our reported paranormal activities. I still remember a few specific ones. Once a nurse who was with a patient as they died distinctly saw a misty mass rise from and hover over the body of the just deceased person. In another incident, a CNA reported that a mounted clock flew off the wall by several feet and landed on the bed. In another patient room, several employees reported an unknown voice whispering their names close by to them when they entered it during the night shifts. In an unusual non-nurse incident, a couple of caseworkers were returning from a break and turned the corner off the elevators. In the convex mirror mounted up in the corner, they saw a man standing there in the hallway just past the next corner they were nearing. No one was physically there, however, when they turned into the hall a second later. They did not take it in stride at all and wouldn't return to work until the nurse manager got a priest out to do a blessing on the floor. People often also random Y reported sensing a presence nearby or being touched. I think this is all probably pretty typical of most hospitals. The saddest part of this was then giving up during COVID. That was one of the worst consequences of it all, and it's rarely talked about. What a travesty. The wanderer is not a past human or an alive human. Demons are everywhere mocking humans' death in hospitals. I'm curious to know what exactly the woman said in the language it was speaking at the time. Creepy. And you wonder why people don't like you. Christian's face with rolling eyes. Fear is the only thing you live by. Rolling on the floor, laughing, cool, throwing kisses. My wife is bilingual and she didn't understand it. Do you mind me narrating this on my channel? I'll make sure you are credited 100% in the video and I'll send you the link when I'm done with it. Sure, thanks. Awesome, and thank you. Do you have a YouTube channel? What's your link? The links are on my page in the description. I can't send a link because of the guidelines. Has anyone here that's a nurse heard of NDE? I'm just curious. Smiling face with hearts grin. Nazar amulet.